The stars above Kepler 442b shimmered like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Governor Sarah Martinez stood at the observation deck of the mining colony, watching the transport ships move between the surface and the orbital station. It was a peaceful Tuesday morning, or at least what they called morning on this distant world. The colony had been here for 12 years now, digging valuable minerals from the red soil and sending them back to Earth. Everything changed when the sensors started screaming. "Governor, we have multiple contacts entering the system," said Chen, the young communications officer. His voice shook slightly. "They're big, really big." Sarah moved to the command center, her boots clicking against the metal floor. The screen showed what Chen meant. 30 massive ships had appeared at the edge of the system, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They were dark gray, covered in what looked like armor plating, with weapon ports bristling along their hulls. "Try to hail them," Sarah ordered, keeping her voice calm even though her heart pounded in her chest. The response came quickly. The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature that made several people in the command center gasp. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales that looked like natural armor. Its eyes were yellow with vertical pupils, and when it spoke, rows of sharp teeth showed in its mouth. "I am Commander Zolth of the Chromath Dominion," the creature said. Its voice was deep and rough, translated by their computers into English. "Your species is now property of the Dominion. You will surrender immediately. Your ships, your resources, and your people belong to us now. Resist and we will destroy everything you have built here." Sarah looked at the faces around her. Some showed fear. Others showed anger. She felt both, but she pushed those feelings down. She had been a soldier before becoming a governor. She knew what happened when you let emotions control your decisions. "This is Governor Martinez of the human colony on Kepler 442b, she replied. "You have entered our system without permission. You have made threats against our people. I will tell you this once. You have 24 hours to leave. If you do not, there will be consequences." Commander Zolth tilted his massive head. For a moment he seemed confused. Then he laughed. It was a harsh barking sound that filled the command center. "Consequences?" he repeated. "Little human, do you understand what you face? The Chromath Dominion has conquered 47 species across this part of the galaxy. We have crushed civilizations that were building cities when your ancestors were still living in caves. You have soft skin, weak bodies, and primitive weapons. What consequences could you possibly deliver?" Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not fear, something else. Something that had kept her ancestors alive when saber-toothed tigers hunted them, when ice ages tried to freeze them, when diseases tried to wipe them out. "You'll find out," she said quietly. Zolth's amusement faded. "Very well. I will show you what happens to those who refuse the Dominion." The transmission cut off. Minutes later, weapons fire lit up the darkness of space. The unmanned orbital station that humanity used for cargo transfers exploded in a bright flash. Debris scattered across the orbit, chunks of metal tumbling through the void. "All civilian personnel to the evacuation shelters," Sarah ordered. "Military personnel, activate Defense Protocol Omega. Someone get me a line to Earth now." Chen stared at her. "Governor, that protocol, we've never used it. It's only for exactly this situation," Sarah finished. "Do it." As the command center erupted into controlled chaos, Sarah pulled up the colony's defense systems. They looked pathetic compared to those massive Chromath warships. A few orbital defense platforms, some ground-based railguns, a handful of patrol ships that were designed for mining operations. Not combat, but appearances could be deceiving. "Governor, I have Admiral Torres from Earth Defense Command," Chen said. An older man appeared on the screen, his gray hair cut military short, his face lined with concern. "Sarah, we're tracking the situation. A fleet is being prepared, but it will take weeks to reach you." "I understand, sir," Sarah said. "We'll hold." "Can you hold?" Torres asked bluntly. Sarah thought about the tunnels her people had dug over 12 years, the mining equipment that could be weaponized, the colonists who had volunteered for militia training, thinking it was just a formality, the human ability to turn anything into a weapon when survival was on the line. "They think we're weak because we don't have scales or claws," she said. "They think we'll break easily. But they don't know what it took for us to survive on Earth. They don't know what we're capable of when someone threatens our home." Torres nodded slowly. "Give them hell, Governor." The transmission ended. Sarah turned to address her command staff. 23 people, all looking at her with a mixture of fear and determination. "I know you're scared," she said. "I am too. But I want you to think about something. Every single human alive today is descended from survivors. Our ancestors survived predators that could tear them apart. They survived starvation, disease, and ice ages. They survived because they were smart, adaptable, and too stubborn to give up. That's in our DNA. That's who we are." She pulled up a map of the colony on the main screen. "The Chromath think we'll fight them like they fight. Stand in a line and shoot at each other until someone falls down. But we're not going to do that. We're going to fight like humans. We're going to use every trick, every advantage, and every weapon we can create or improvise. We're going to make them regret coming here." "How long do we have?" asked Marcus, the head of security. "They'll probably attack within the next 6 hours," Sarah said. "They want to break us quickly, make an example. So here's what we're going to do." She outlined the plan. It was risky, brutal, and completely insane by conventional military standards. It was also typically human. As people scattered to their assignments, Sarah stayed in the command center. She pulled up the external cameras and watched the Chromath fleet positioning itself in orbit. They moved slowly, confidently, like predators who had never met anything that could hurt them. "Unknown contact requesting communication," Chen said suddenly. "It's from one of the patrol ships." Captain James Rodriguez appeared on screen. He commanded the largest of their 6 patrol vessels, a converted mining ship called the Defiant. "Governor, my crew and I have been discussing the situation," Rodriguez said. "We know what you're planning for ground defense. But someone needs to make those bastards think twice about orbital bombardment. My ship is old and slow, but we can make some noise before they take us down." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "James, that's a suicide mission." "It's a distraction mission," he corrected with a slight smile. "Big difference. Besides, you know what they say about humanity. We're crazy enough to fly a mining ship against a battlecruiser if it means protecting our own." Sarah wanted to order him to stand down, but she knew he was right. "They needed every advantage. Make it count," she said. "Always do, Governor." Defiant out. As the hours ticked down, Sarah watched her colony transform. Civilians moved into the underground shelters with calm efficiency. Soldiers took positions in hidden bunkers. Engineers rigged explosives along the main approach routes. The mining lasers were recalibrated for combat. And above it all, the Chromath fleet waited, confident in their inevitable victory. They had no idea what was coming. Commander Zalth looked at the readings from the human colony and shook his massive head. Their defenses were laughable. This would be over in hours, perhaps minutes. The humans would learn what every other species had learned. The Chromath Dominion could not be defied. He gave the order to begin the invasion, never suspecting that he had just made the worst mistake of his very long life. The Chromath dropships descended through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b like falling meteors. Commander Zalth watched from his flagship, the Pride of Dominion, as his forces began their assault. 40 dropships, each carrying 50 soldiers bred specifically for combat. 2,000 warriors against a mining colony of 3,000 humans, most of them civilians. The outcome was certain, or so he thought. The first dropship landed in what the humans called Landing Zone Alpha, a flat area outside the main colony dome. The massive rear door opened with a hiss of hydraulics. Chromath soldiers poured out, their scales gleaming in the alien sunlight, weapons ready. Nothing happened. Squad leader Thrak scanned the area with his enhanced vision. He could see for miles across the red landscape. Empty buildings. Abandoned equipment. No movement, no targets. "Command Landing Zone Alpha is secure," he reported. No resistance. "Proceed to objective," came the reply. Thrak led his squad toward the main colony structure, a massive dome that housed most of the human population. According to their intelligence, the humans should be cowering inside, waiting to surrender. They made it 50 meters before the ground exploded beneath them. The humans had mined the entire approach, not with sophisticated military explosives, but with improvised devices made from mining charges and fertilizer. Crude, simple, and devastatingly effective. 6 Chromath soldiers died instantly. Others screamed as shrapnel tore through even their armored scales. "Ambush!" Thrak roared into his communicator. "We're under—" A bullet punched through his throat. He fell confused. Where had it come from? He couldn't see any humans. His vision dimmed as blood filled his lungs. The bullet had traveled nearly a kilometer, fired by a human sniper named Sarah Chen from a hidden position in the hills. She was already moving to her next position before Thrak's body hit the ground. Across the landing zones, similar scenes played out. The humans weren't fighting like the Chromath expected. They weren't standing in formation or holding defensive positions. They were everywhere and nowhere, striking from hidden positions and vanishing before the Chromath could respond. Private First Class Marcus Johnson crouched in a tunnel beneath the colony. He was scared. The Chromath were bigger, stronger, and tougher than any human. But he had advantages. He knew this colony like he knew his own home. Because it was his home, he heard heavy footsteps above. Chromath soldiers searching the buildings. He reached for the detonator in his hand. 3 days ago, this tunnel had been used to transport ore. Now it was a trap. He pressed the button. The building above collapsed, taking 5 Chromath soldiers with it. Marcus was already running through the tunnels to his next position. Commander Zolth stared at the tactical displays in growing disbelief. His forces had landed successfully. They had superior numbers in every engagement. They should be overwhelming the humans through sheer strength and firepower. Instead, his casualty reports kept climbing. How are they doing this? He demanded. They're primitives. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Grath, studied the data. They're not fighting us directly, Commander. They're using hit-and-run tactics, traps, ambushes. They strike and disappear before we can retaliate. Cowards, Zolth spat. Effective cowards, Grath replied carefully. We've lost 300 soldiers in the first hour. At this rate, we have 2,000 soldiers, Zolth interrupted. More than enough to crush 3,000 miners and farmers. Order all units to advance. Burn the colony if necessary. I want this ended. In orbit, Captain James Rodriguez guided the Defiant toward the Chromath fleet. His crew of 12 watched the massive warships growing larger on their screens. The smallest Chromath vessel was 10 times the size of their converted mining ship. This is a terrible plan, said his pilot, a young woman named Amy Blackwell. You're absolutely right, Rodriguez agreed. But it's the plan we've got. Arm everything that can shoot. Target that cruiser's engine section. Captain, our weapons can barely scratch their armor, Amy protested. We're not trying to destroy them, Rodriguez explained. We're trying to piss them off. Make them focus on us instead of bombarding the colony. Now punch it. The Defiant accelerated, her engines screaming. They opened fire with everything they had. Mining lasers, improvised missiles, even a railgun they'd mounted yesterday. The weapon's fire splashed across the Chromath cruiser's shields like rain, but it got their attention. Multiple contacts breaking formation, Amy reported. 3 destroyers heading our way. Captain, they're launching fighters. Evasive maneuvers, Rodriguez ordered. Let's see how well these overgrown lizards can fly. What followed was less a battle and more a desperate game of cat and mouse. The Defiant couldn't hope to win a straight fight, but she was smaller and more maneuverable than the Chromath ships. Rodriguez used every trick he'd learned in 20 years of flying through asteroid fields and debris zones. The Chromath fighters were faster, better armed, and flown by warriors with decades of combat experience. But they'd never fought anyone like Rodriguez, a man who once threaded a mining ship through the rings of Saturn on a dare. He led them on a chase through the orbital space around Kepler 442b. When they got close, he'd dodge behind satellites or orbital debris. When he had breathing room, he'd fire back, targeting sensors and communications arrays rather than armor. For 15 minutes, he kept 3 Chromath destroyers and a squadron of fighters occupied. 15 minutes when they weren't bombing the colony below. Then his luck ran out. A fighter got a clean shot at his engines. The Defiant shuddered as explosions rippled through her stern. Hull breach in engineering, Amy reported. Her voice calm despite the alarms blaring. We've lost main power. Rodriguez looked at his crew. They all knew what came next. But nobody looked afraid. They looked determined. It's been an honor, he said simply. Honor's all ours, Captain, Amy replied. Rodriguez opened a channel to the colony. Governor Martinez, this is Defiant. We bought you 15 minutes. Make them count. And tell Earth. Tell them we went down fighting. Understood, Defiant, came Sarah Martinez's voice. You did us proud. All of you. The transmission ended. Rodriguez looked at the Chromath destroyers closing in for the kill. He smiled grimly and aimed his dying ship at the nearest one. If they were going down, they'd take someone with them. The Defiant's final act was to ram the Chromath destroyer at maximum speed. The explosion lit up the orbital space like a small sun. The destroyer survived but heavily damaged, limping away from the fight with two of its main weapons offline. On the ground, Governor Martinez watched the explosion through the colony's external cameras. She felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. Rodriguez and his crew had bought them time. She wouldn't waste it mourning. Not yet. Status report, she ordered. Chromath forces are in the colony, Marcus reported from his position. But they're confused, taking heavy casualties. They don't know how to fight this kind of battle. Good, Martinez said. Keep them confused. Keep them scared. Make them understand that every meter of our home will cost them blood. In his flagship, Commander Zolth stared at the casualty reports with growing horror. 500 soldiers dead, another 200 wounded, and the humans showed no signs of surrendering. Worse, his warriors were starting to whisper among themselves. Fear was spreading through his ranks. They'd expected an easy conquest. Instead, they'd walked into a nightmare where the enemy could be anywhere, strike from nowhere and disappear like ghosts. For the first time in his long career, Zolth began to doubt victory was certain. A communication came through from the human flagship, a vessel called the Determination that had been hiding among the asteroid belt. A human female appeared on his screen. She wore a military uniform and had gray in her hair. Commander Zolth, she said. I am Captain Diana Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You were warned. You chose not to listen. Now you're learning what my people learned thousands of years ago. It's not the strongest predator that survives. It's the smartest. The most adaptable. The one that refuses to quit no matter what. She leaned closer to the camera. We're persistence hunters, Commander. We chase our prey until it collapses from exhaustion. We use tools, traps, and tactics that you've never imagined. And we never ever stop. You came to our home. You threatened our people. Now you're going to learn why every predator on Earth eventually learned to fear us. The transmission ended, leaving Zolth staring at a blank screen. For the first time in his life, the mighty Chromath commander felt something he'd never experienced before. Fear. The Galactic Council chamber floated in the neutral space between star systems, a massive station where representatives from 73 different species gathered to discuss matters affecting the known galaxy. Today, the chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Ambassador T'Challa of the Viridian Collective watched the holographic display showing the battle at Kepler 442b. Her species had surrendered to the Chromath. Dominion 60 years ago after losing a single fleet engagement. They'd believed resistance was futile. Now she was beginning to wonder if they'd been wrong. The humans are still fighting, whispered Ambassador Krell, his insectoid features twitching with what might have been excitement. The Chromath sent 30 warships, 30! No species has resisted that kind of force in living memory. T'Challa's tentacles rippled with concern. The Chromath will not tolerate this defiance. They'll send more ships, many more. Let them, said a voice from behind. Ambassador Vex of the Silicon Collective, a being of crystalline structure and pure logic. This conflict provides valuable data. The Chromath have ruled through fear and military superiority for centuries. But what happens when someone refuses to be afraid? Meanwhile, on the Chromath homeworld of Krathos Prime, the High Command gathered in their war room. The chamber was built to intimidate, with walls decorated by the weapons and flags of conquered species. 47 civilizations reduced to trophies. General Mordath, Supreme Military Commander of the Dominion, studied the reports from Kepler 442b with growing anger. He was older than Zolth, his scales darker and scarred from 1,000 battles. How is this possible? He demanded. They're mammals, soft-skinned creatures without natural weapons or armor. They should have surrendered immediately. They possess no significant advantages, agreed Strategic Coordinator Velsh, bringing up comparative biological data. Humans are weaker than us. They can't breathe methane like the Telroth. They don't have the armored hides of the Korthan. Their reaction times are slower than the Zealoth. By every measurable metric, they should be inferior warriors. And yet they're winning, Mordath said flatly. Not winning, Velsh corrected. Surviving. There is a difference, Mordath's yellow eyes narrowed. Then we'll change that. Prepare Battle Group Epsilon, 300 ships. I want that colony turned to dust and every human there dead. We'll make an example that the galaxy will remember for 1,000 years. Velsh hesitated. General, 300 ships is more than we've deployed since the Vex Wars. Perhaps Do you question my orders? Mordath growled, "No, General, but I suggest we learn more about these humans first. According to our intelligence, they've only been spacefaring for approximately 300 years. Yet they've colonized multiple systems and, which makes their defiance even more insulting," Mordath interrupted. "Ready the fleet. We leave in 2 days." Back on Kepler 442b, Governor Martinez stood in what remained of the command center. A Chromath artillery strike had damaged the building, forcing them to relocate to the underground bunkers. But they were still fighting, still holding. "Status report," she said, her voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. Marcus appeared on the screen, his face streaked with dirt and blood. "Not all his blood. Chromath ground forces are pulling back to their landing zones. We've eliminated approximately 700 of their soldiers. Our casualties are at 233. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. 233 people dead. She knew every one of them. This was a small colony. Everyone knew everyone. Estimated enemy strength? She asked. Maybe 1,300 combat-effective soldiers left. But Governor, they're not advancing anymore. They're fortifying positions and waiting for something. Orbital bombardment, Sarah said grimly. They're going to try to break us from space. How are our underground shelters? Packed full. We can survive direct hits for a while, but if they keep pounding us, I know. Sarah pulled up the tactical display. Captain Chen's ship, the Determination, was still out there, hiding in the asteroid field with 5 other human vessels. Not enough to fight the Chromath fleet, but enough to be a nuisance. Her communicator buzzed. Governor, this is Chen. I'm picking up massive energy signatures at the system's edge. More Chromath ships are arriving. A lot more. Sarah's stomach dropped. How many? I'm counting 300 contacts. Repeat. 300 Chromath warships just entered the system. The command center fell silent. Everyone heard the transmission. 300 warships against their handful of patrol boats and a mining colony with improvised weapons. We can't fight that, whispered one of the technicians. Sarah wanted to agree. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was impossible. They should surrender, save lives, accept defeat. But then she thought about Captain Rodriguez and his crew, who'd sacrificed themselves to buy 15 minutes. She thought about the miners who'd picked up weapons to defend their homes. She thought about her daughter back on Earth and what kind of galaxy she'd grow up in if bullies like the Chromath were never challenged. We don't have to fight all 300, she said finally. We just have to survive long enough for Earth's fleet to arrive, and make the Chromath pay so dearly for every meter of ground that they start wondering if this colony is worth it. How long until Earth's fleet gets here? Marcus asked. Admiral Torres estimates 3 weeks. Can we hold for 3 weeks against that? Marcus gestured at the screen showing the approaching armada. We're human, Sarah said simply. We held against ice ages, against predators, against plagues and droughts and every other thing that tried to wipe us out. We held because we're too stubborn to quit. So yes, we'll hold. She pulled up a communication channel to all colonial forces. This is Governor Martinez to all personnel. I won't lie to you. A massive Chromath fleet just arrived. The odds look impossible. But I want you to remember something. Humans don't survive because we're the strongest or fastest. We survive because we adapt, because we endure, because when something tries to kill us, we learn from it and come back stronger. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. The Chromath think they can break us with superior numbers. They're wrong. Every one of them that lands on our soil is going to face colonists who know every tunnel, every building, every hiding spot. Every ship they send into orbit is going to face humans who've weaponized everything from mining lasers to cargo haulers. We're going to make this the most expensive victory they've ever won. And by the time Earth's fleet arrives, we're going to show the galaxy what happens when you mess with humans. Across the colony, in bunkers and tunnels and hidden positions, people straightened their shoulders. They were scared. They had every right to be. But they were also angry, and determined, and very, very human. In his quarters aboard the Pride of Dominion, Commander Zolth stared at a datapad showing casualty reports. 700 soldiers dead in 2 days. 700 warriors who'd trained their entire lives for combat, killed by miners and farmers using improvised weapons and dirty tactics. The humans didn't fight with honor. They used traps and ambushes. They struck from hiding and ran before his warriors could retaliate. They showed no respect for the traditional ways of warfare, and it was devastatingly effective. A message came through from General Mordath himself. Commander Zolth, I am arriving with reinforcements. You will hold position until I arrive. Then we will show these humans what happens to those who defy the Dominion. Yes, General, Zolth replied, but his hearts weren't in it. He'd been so confident 2 days ago. Now he wasn't sure of anything except that humans were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, the message from Kepler 442b was racing toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds. When it arrived, Admiral Torres watched the recording of the Chromath fleet entering the system with cold fury. "How long until our fleet is ready?" he asked. 14 days, sir, replied his aide. "Make it 10, Torres ordered, and send a message to every human colony in the sector. Tell them what's happening at Kepler 442b. Tell them the Chromath Dominion thinks they can bully us into submission, and tell them that Earth is coming." He stood, his old body still straight and strong. It's time the galaxy learned something about humanity. We're a young species, we're new to space, but we've been fighting for survival since before we had fire, and we've never stopped learning how to fight better. The aide saluted. "Yes, sir." "Sir, permission to speak freely?" "Granted. We're going to tear them apart, aren't we?" Torres smiled grimly. "Son, the Chromath just poked a very large, very angry bear. They're about to learn why our ancestors survived every other predator on Earth. We didn't survive by running. We survived by making sure nothing ever wanted to hunt us twice." Across human space, warships began mobilizing. Marines loaded onto transport vessels. Factories that built mining equipment started building weapons instead. Engineers who designed civilian ships started designing warships. Humanity was going to war, and the galaxy would never be the same. General Mordath's armada arrived at Kepler 442b like a storm of metal and fire. 300 warships, enough to conquer entire star systems. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable, and surveyed the planet below with satisfaction. The human colony looked small and vulnerable from orbit. Damaged buildings, scarred landscape, surely they would surrender now. He opened a communication channel to the surface. "Humans of Kepler 442b, this is General Mordath of the Chromath Dominion. You have fought bravely but pointlessly. Your resistance ends now. Surrender immediately or we will reduce your colony to ash." The response came from Governor Martinez. She looked tired, her uniform dirty and torn, but her eyes were still defiant. "General, your Commander Zolth made the same threat 5 days ago. Then he made the mistake of trying to back it up. How many soldiers has he lost now? 800? 900? And you want to send more warriors to die on our soil?" Mordath's scales rippled with anger. "We have 300 ships, human. You have nothing. This defiance is madness, maybe," Martinez agreed. "But it's our madness. Our home, our choice. You want this colony? Come and take it. But I promise you, General, every meter of ground will cost you blood. Every building will be a fortress. Every tunnel will be a trap. We'll make you pay for this victory until you wish you'd never heard of humanity." The transmission ended. Mordath stood in silence for a moment. Then he gave the order he'd given 100 times before to dozens of species across the galaxy. "Begin orbital bombardment. Target their military installations first, then their infrastructure. Break them." The Chromath fleet opened fire. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds rained down on Kepler 442b. The colony's orbital defense platforms fired back, destroying 3 Chromath frigates before being overwhelmed. Explosions lit up the planet's surface like lightning, but the humans had learned from Earth's bloody history. They'd built their critical infrastructure underground. The residential areas, the command centers, the life support systems, all buried deep beneath the red soil where orbital weapons couldn't reach. The bombardment continued for 6 hours. When it finally stopped, the surface of Kepler 442b was a cratered wasteland. No buildings remained standing. The landing pads were destroyed. Even the landscape had changed, reshaped by the devastating firepower. "Surely they're dead now," said Commander Zolth, standing beside Mordath. "Send down scouts," Mordath ordered. "Verify there are no survivors." 3 dropships descended through the smoke and ash. They landed in what had been the main colony plaza. Chromath soldiers deployed, weapons ready. The ground beneath them exploded. The humans had mined the entire surface during the bombardment, predicting exactly where the Chromath would land. 40 soldiers died instantly. The survivors retreated to their dropships only to find the landing gear sabotaged. They were stranded. Then the real nightmare began. From tunnels and hidden bunkers, human forces emerged. They'd weathered the orbital bombardment in their underground shelters. Now they were angry. Private Marcus Johnson led a squad through the tunnels toward one of the stranded dropships. His team included a doctor, 2 engineers, and a schoolteacher. None of them were professional soldiers before this war started. Now they moved with grim efficiency. "Remember," Marcus whispered, "they're bigger and stronger. Don't fight fair. Use the terrain. Use your weapons. Make every shot count." They emerged from a tunnel behind the dropship. Marcus fired his rifle at the Chromath soldiers' legs, the weak point in their armored scales. Others threw improvised explosives. The schoolteacher, a middle-aged woman named Helen, operated a mining laser that cut through Chromath armor like paper. The battle was short and brutal. The Chromath soldiers were trained warriors, but they were disoriented, scared, and fighting on human terms. Within minutes, the dropship was secured. Across the landing zones, similar scenes played out. The Chromath had landed with overwhelming force, but the humans had turned the surface into a killing ground. Every piece of cover was a potential ambush site. Every shadow might hide a sniper. Every step might trigger a mine. Aboard the Inevitable, Mordeth watched his casualty reports climb with growing horror. Another 200 soldiers lost. And they hadn't even secured a single objective. "How are they still fighting?" he demanded. "We destroyed everything on the surface. They're underground," Zolth explained, his voice hollow. "They've built a network of tunnels and bunkers beneath the colony. Our orbital weapons can't reach them there." "Then we'll dig them out," Mordeth growled. "Send in heavy assault teams. Demolition units. We'll collapse every tunnel until we bury them alive." But the humans had planned for that too. The Chromath assault teams advanced into the tunnel networks with confidence. They had superior strength, advanced sensors, and overwhelming firepower. But the tunnels were narrow, dark, and maze-like. The Chromath's size became a disadvantage in the cramped spaces. Worse, the humans knew every centimeter of the tunnels. They'd lived and worked here for 12 years. They set traps that the Chromath sensors couldn't detect. They used the darkness to their advantage. They struck and faded away before the Chromath could retaliate. Sergeant Wu led her team through a tunnel junction. She heard heavy footsteps approaching Chromath soldiers. She signaled her team to positions. When the Chromath rounded the corner, the humans were waiting. A shaped charge detonated, collapsing the tunnel behind the enemy squad. Then Wu's team opened fire from prepared positions, cutting down the disoriented Chromath warriors. "Fall back to checkpoint 7, Wu ordered. Her team disappeared into the tunnels, leaving only bodies and darkness behind. The Chromath who survived reported back in shaken voices. The tunnels were death traps. The humans were ghosts. Every advance cost lives. Meanwhile, in orbit, Captain Diana Chen watched from her hiding spot in the asteroid field. The Determination and 5 other human ships were badly outnumbered, but they weren't sitting idle. "Target that troop transport," Chen ordered. "Fire everything we have." The human ships emerged from the asteroids, firing a coordinated barrage at a Chromath transport vessel. The transport's shields held, but the attack forced it to break formation. More importantly, it distracted the Chromath fleet. "Pattern Delta," Chen commanded. Her ships scattered, each one heading in a different direction. The Chromath fleet tried to pursue all of them, spreading their forces thin. It was the oldest trick in the book, divide and conquer. But it worked because the humans were willing to take risks that the Chromath couldn't imagine. Chen's ships flew through debris fields that should have torn them apart. They used asteroids as shields and weapons, pushing them into the paths of pursuing Chromath vessels. The Determination was smaller and slower than the Chromath warships. But Chen had spent 20 years piloting through dangerous space. She knew how to use every advantage, no matter how small. 3 weeks into the siege, General Mordeth stared at casualty reports that didn't make sense. His forces had lost over 2,000 soldiers. They controlled none of the colony's infrastructure. The human defenders showed no signs of breaking. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "We have every advantage. Superior numbers. Superior weapons. Superior warriors. How are they still fighting?" Ambassador Tishala, who had arrived to observe the siege, spoke carefully. "General, may I offer an observation?" "Speak. You've conquered 47 species. Each one surrendered after demonstrating your military superiority. You assumed humans would do the same." "They should have," Mordeth insisted. "But they didn't," Tishala continued. "And now you're fighting a different kind of war. You're not fighting to conquer. You're fighting to survive, and humans are very, very good at survival warfare. She pulled up data on Earth's history, wars that lasted years, conflicts that killed millions, humans fighting humans with a ferocity and creativity that stunned other species. Humans have been fighting each other for their entire history, Tishala explained. They've developed warfare into a science. They understand tactics, logistics, and psychology in ways we never needed to. Because when your species fights itself for thousands of years, you get very good at it. Mordath stared at the data, finally beginning to understand. The Chromath fought to dominate. Humans fought to win. Sir, we have new contacts entering the system, reported a sensor officer. 60 ships. They're human vessels from Earth. Mordath felt something cold in his chest. Only 60 ships against our 300? Sir, they're not slowing down. They're heading straight for us, and they're broadcasting a message. Admiral Torres appeared on the screen. His hair was gray, his face lined with age, but his eyes burned with cold fury. General Mordath, this is Admiral Torres of the Earth Defense Force. You came to our colony. You threatened our people. You killed our citizens. We don't care that you have more ships. We don't care that you've conquered 47 other species. We're not them. We're human. And you just made the worst mistake of your life. The transmission ended. The human fleet accelerated, charging directly at the Chromath Armada. On the planet below, Governor Martinez heard the news and smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. All units. This is Martinez. Our relief has arrived. Time to show the Chromath what happens when you mess with humans. Attack with everything we have. Make them remember this day for the rest of their lives. The Battle of Kepler 442b began with 60 human warships charging directly at 300 Chromath vessels. To any military strategist in the galaxy, it looked like suicide. To Admiral Torres, it looked like the only option. All ships, this is Torres. They expect us to be cautious, to be scared. Show them what human courage looks like. Show them why we survived when everything on Earth tried to kill us. Attack pattern Omega. Give them hell. The human fleet split into smaller groups, each one targeting different sections of the Chromath Armada. They didn't try to match firepower. Instead, they used speed, coordination, and tactics that the Chromath had never encountered. The human ships weren't the biggest or most powerful, but they were designed by engineers who'd studied every space battle in human history, from the ancient naval conflicts on Earth to theoretical scenarios dreamed up by military strategists. Every ship was optimized for pack tactics. Commander Zalth watched from the Pride of Dominion as the human ships darted through his formation like angry hornets. They're too fast. Our targeting systems can't lock on. All batteries fire at will, Mordath ordered. Saturate the area with weapons fire. They can't dodge forever. But the humans didn't try to dodge everything. They had shields and they used them intelligently. They'd absorb hits on reinforced sections while protecting critical systems. And every time a Chromath ship fired, the humans fired back. Not at armor or shields, but at weapons ports, sensor arrays, and engine sections. Captain Sarah Kim commanded the destroyer Relentless. Her ship dove beneath a Chromath battlecruiser, firing continuously at its ventral surface. The weapons barely scratched the cruiser's armor, but they didn't need to. They just needed to damage the shield generators. Target marked, Kim reported. Convergence pattern 3. 4 other human ships received the signal. They converged on the battlecruiser from different angles, all firing at the same spot where Kim had weakened the shields. Combined fire punched through, destroying the cruiser's main reactor. 1 Chromath capital ship down. 299 to go. On the planet's surface, Governor Martinez led the final assault on the Chromath landing zones. Her people had been defending for 3 weeks. They were exhausted, running low on supplies, and they'd lost over 400 colonists, but they hadn't broken. All teams, advance, she ordered. From tunnels, bunkers, and hidden positions across the colony, human forces emerged. They moved in coordinated groups using combined arms tactics that would have made ancient Earth military commanders proud. Marcus Johnson's squad advanced on Landing Zone Alpha, where Chromath forces had fortified their position. The enemy had superior firepower and prepared defenses. By conventional military wisdom, attacking them was suicide. So Marcus didn't attack conventionally. His team split into 3 groups. One created a diversion, drawing Chromath fire. Another circled around using the tunnel network. The third, led by Marcus himself, approached from an unexpected angle using a mining vehicle they'd converted into an improvised tank. The Chromath soldiers were tough, experienced warriors. But they'd been trained to fight frontal assaults, not multi-directional attacks from enemies who seemed to pop up everywhere. Helen, the schoolteacher turned soldier, operated the mining laser from their improvised tank. She'd been teaching mathematics 3 weeks ago. Now she cut through Chromath defensive positions with cold efficiency. They're falling back, Marcus reported. Landing Zone Alpha is ours. Across the colony, other teams reported similar successes. The Chromath ground forces, depleted by 3 weeks of attrition warfare, couldn't hold against the coordinated human assault. In orbit, the space battle raged. Admiral Torres had lost 12 ships, but the Chromath had lost 43. The math still heavily favored the Chromath, but the psychological balance had shifted. Chromath captains who'd never known defeat were suddenly uncertain. Their warriors who'd conquered dozens of species were experiencing something new: doubt. "Sir, the Chromath fleet is reforming," reported Torres's tactical officer. "They're consolidating into a defensive formation." Torres smiled grimly. "They're scared. They came here expecting easy prey and found predators instead. Maintain pressure. Don't let them regroup." But General Mordath wasn't ready to surrender. He opened a fleet-wide channel. "Warriors of the Dominion, do not falter. We have faced worse odds and prevailed. These humans are clever, but they're still primitives. We will crush them and make an example that the galaxy will never forget." His words rallied the Chromath fleet. They began a coordinated counterattack, using their superior numbers to finally overwhelm the human ships. The human destroyer Valiant took a direct hit, her hull breaching. Captain John Miller ordered evacuation, but stayed at his post long enough to ram his dying ship into a Chromath cruiser, taking both vessels out of the fight. The human frigate Dauntless lost engines and weapons but continued broadcasting targeting data for other ships, acting as a spotter even as enemy fire tore her apart. The human carrier Indomitable launched her fighters even as plasma fire melted through her armor. The fighters swarmed the Chromath fleet, piloted by humans who'd trained for this moment their entire lives. Admiral Torres watched his ships fighting and dying with pride that hurt in his chest. 60 ships against 300. They were losing. But they were making the Chromath pay for every meter of space. Then the cavalry arrived. "Sir, new contacts entering the system," called the sensor officer. Multiple signatures. Human vessels from the Mars shipyards, the Belt colonies, even civilian transports that have been armed. Torres pulled up the data. Another 80 ships, most of them not military vessels but cargo haulers, mining ships, and colony transports that had been hastily fitted with weapons. And behind them, another 50 actual warships from Earth's defense forces. "This is Captain Rebecca Walsh of the cargo hauler Prosperity," came a transmission. "Sorry we're late, Admiral. Had to stop and pick up some friends. Hope you saved some enemies for us." Torres felt tears in his eyes. Humanity had come together. Military and civilian, Earth and colonies, all united against a common threat. "All ships, this is Torres. Let's finish this." The combined human fleet hit the Chromath armada like a hammer. The Chromath still had numerical superiority, but they'd been fighting for 3 weeks straight. Their warriors were exhausted. Their ships were damaged, and now they faced an enemy that refused to quit, refused to surrender, refused to be conquered. General Mordath watched his fleet being torn apart, and finally accepted the truth. The humans weren't going to break. They would fight until every last one of them was dead, and they would take most of his fleet with them. For the first time in the Chromath Dominion's history, a general made a decision that would have been unthinkable days ago. "All ships cease fire," Mordath ordered quietly. "Recall all ground forces. We're withdrawing." Commander Zalth stared at him in shock. "General, we can still win." "We have the numbers. Numbers mean nothing against an enemy who won't surrender," Mordath interrupted. "Look at the casualty reports, Zalth. We've lost over 3,000 soldiers and 100 ships to take this one colony, and the humans keep fighting. If we continue, we'll destroy them. But they'll destroy us in the process." He sat heavily in his command chair, suddenly looking old. "I've conquered 47 species, Zalth. I thought I understood warfare. But the humans have taught me something new. There's a difference between being strong and being unbreakable. The Chromath are strong. The humans are unbreakable." The withdrawal began. Chromath ships broke off from combat, gathered their surviving ground forces, and jumped to faster-than-light speed. They left behind wreckage, bodies, and a colony that had defied impossible odds. On the surface of Kepler 442b, Governor Martinez stood among the ruins of her colony. Around her, exhausted colonists emerged from bunkers and tunnels. They'd lost over 500 people. The colony was destroyed, but they had survived. "Governor, the Chromath are leaving," Marcus reported, his voice numb with exhaustion and relief. Martinez nodded. She wanted to celebrate, but she was too tired, too emotionally drained. She looked at the people around her. Miners, engineers, teachers, farmers who'd become soldiers because they had no choice. "We held," she said simply. "We held." 10 years later, the galaxy was a different place. The Chromath Dominion still existed, but their reputation for invincibility was shattered. Species they'd conquered began asking questions. Some began resisting. The humans didn't build an empire. They didn't seek revenge. They rebuilt Kepler 442b and continued exploring, colonizing and living. But the galaxy remembered what happened when someone threatened them. In the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador T'Challa proposed a resolution. "We should establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. They've proven they can defend themselves. More importantly, they've proven they're reasonable. They could have pursued the Chromath fleet and sought revenge. They didn't. They simply want to live in peace." The resolution passed unanimously. When a new aggressive species called the Zorax Collective emerged and began threatening human colonies, they received a broadcast that had become famous across the galaxy. The message was simple, showing footage from the Battle of Kepler. It showed human soldiers fighting against impossible odds, ships ramming into enemy vessels, colonists defending their homes with improvised weapons.